I bid you welcome.
To a new world of gods and monsters.
How do you like that, eh?
Even a man who's pure at heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the moon is full and bright.
I love dead, hate living.
It's a perfect night for mystery and horror. The air itself is filled with monsters.
Midnight, the witching hour on the spooky old country estate. Mad mysticism unfolding before your eyes in the most sensational mystery screenplay ever produced. New sensations await you in this shivery, palpitating dramas that'll cause your nerves to tingle, chill you as never a picture has before. A real adventure in the cinema. Don't miss it. So reads a print ad from the Daily Nebraskan from November 20th, 1927, regarding Universal's silent comedy horror picture, The Cat and the Canary. The film was widely influential in the old dark house genre of films, which were popular from the 1930s through the 1950s. Featuring equal amounts of laughs and screams, The Cat and the Canary is a hidden gem in the legacy of Universal horror that certainly deserves more recognition. I'm Ian the Wolfman, and this is the Monster Archives. The Cat and the Canary is an adaptation of John Willard's 1922 black comedy play of the same name, which opened on Broadway in New York on February 7, 1922, at the National Theater. It closed in May of 1922 after 148 performances. The film stars Laura LaPlante as Annabelle West, Forrest Stanley as Charlie Wilder, and Creighton Hale as Paul Jones. The plot revolves around the death of Cyrus West, who is the trio's uncle, and the reading of his will 20 years later. Annabelle inherits Cyrus' fortune, but when she and her family spend the night in his haunted mansion, they are stalked by a mysterious figure. Meanwhile, a lunatic, mainly known as the Cat, escapes from an asylum and hides in the mansion. The Cat and the Canary was directed by Paul Leni, a German filmmaker and key figure in German Expressionism. His well-regarded German works include Hintertreppe in 1921 and Waxworks in 1924, which starred Conrad Veidt. In 1927, he accepted Carl Laemmle's invitation to become a director at Universal Studios and moved to Hollywood. Waxworks impressed Laemmle, being struck by Leni's departure from traditional Expressionism by the inclusion of humor and playfulness during grotesque scenes. Meanwhile, D.W. Griffith's One Exciting Night from 1922 began a gothic horror film trend that Laemmle, who wasn't particularly fond of fright flicks himself, wanted to capitalize on. The 1922 stage play of The Cat and the Canary led to Griffith's film. Actor Henry Hull, who would go on to star in Universal's Werewolf of London in 1935, starred in both the stage version of The Cat and the Canary as well as One Exciting Night. Other films in the genre include Alfred E. Green's Now Lost, The Ghost Breaker from 1922, Frank Tuttle's Puritan Passions in 1923, Roland West's The Monster in 1925 and The Bat in 1926, and Alfred Santel's The Gorilla in 1927. All of these were comedy horror film adaptations of Broadway stage plays that proved successful. Laemmle turned to John Willard's popular play, The Cat and the Canary, which centered on an heiress whose family tries to drive her insane to steal her inheritance. Willard was initially hesitant in allowing Laemmle to film his play because, as historian Douglas Broad explains, that would have exposed to virtually everyone the trick ending, destroying the play's potential as an ongoing moneymaker. Nevertheless, Willard was convinced, and the play was adapted into a screenplay by Alfred A. Cohn and Robert F. Hill. The Cat and the Canary features veteran silent film stars Laura LaPlante, Creighton Hale, and Forrest Stanley. According to film historian Gary Don Rhodes, LaPlante's part as Annabelle West in the film was typical for women in horror and mystery films. The female in the horror film becomes hunted, the quarry. She has little to do, and so the question becomes, what will be done with her? Rhodes adds, the heroines are young and beautiful, but represent more a prize to be possessed, whether stolen by a villain or owned by a young hero at the film's conclusions. Following The Cat and the Canary, LaPlante maintained a career at Universal, returning in Leni's 1928 mystery film, The Last Warning, which is sometimes described as a companion piece to The Cat and the Canary. However, LaPlante is described as a victim of talkies, not transitioning into the 1930s era of sound films. She received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame before her death in 1996 from Alzheimer's disease at the age of 91. Irish actor Creighton Hale was cast as bumbling hero Paul Jones, Annabelle's cousin. Hale had appeared in 64 silent films before The Cat and the Canary, with notable roles in the 1914 serial The Exploits of Elaine and D.W. Griffith's Way Down East in 1920 and Orphans of the Storm in 1921. Hale's role in the film was to provide comic relief. According to critic John Howard Reed, he is forever backing into furniture or finding himself in a risque position under a bed or wrestling with stray objects like falling books or enormous bed springs. Like LaPlante, Hale had trouble finding a solid career in sound films. Many of his subsequent parts were minor and uncredited. The villainous cat, revealed to be cousin Charles Wilder, was played by Forrest Stanley, an actor who had played in films such as When Knighthood Was in Flower in 1922, Bavu in 1923, Through the Dark in 1924, and Shadow of the Law in 1926. After The Cat and the Canary, Stanley played minor roles in Universal films such as Showboat in 1936 and Curse of the Undead in 1959. He also starred in episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Studio 57, and Gunsmoke. The film's supporting cast was referred to by one historian as second-rate, and excellent by another. Arthur Edmund Carew, who played Ledoux in The Phantom of the Opera, plays Harry Blythe. Tully Marshall starred as the suspicious lawyer, Roger Crosby. Martha Maddox was cast as the eerie and superstitious housekeeper, Mammy Pleasant. Gertrude Astor and Flora Finch play greedy relatives Cicely Young and Aunt Susan Silsby. Finally, Lucian Littlefield was cast as Dr. Ira Lazar, who closely resembles Werner Krause's title character in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. As Universal anticipated, director Paul Leni turned Willard's play into an expressionist film suited to an American audience. Historian Bernard F. Dick observes that Leni reduced German expressionism, with its weird chiaroscuro, asymmetric sets, and excessive stylization, to a format compatible with American film practice. Despite its origin as a stage play, The Cat and the Canary never looks or evokes the feeling as such. Many stage play adaptations, especially of the 1920s, fell into the trap of looking like a play filmed for the big screen. There would traditionally be less emphasis on the setting and environment and plenty of overacting. Many historians note that this is not the case with Leni's style. The camera work by Gilbert Warrington is extremely fluid. Leni used similar camera effects found in films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari to set the atmosphere of The Cat and the Canary. The film opens with a hand wiping cobwebs away to reveal the title credits, an effect that Universal would revisit with 1943's Son of Dracula. There were effective double exposure effects, including the superimposition of a grimacing skull next to Creighton Hale's Paul Jones, who panics upon hearing the word death. The dialogue cards are even occasionally animated, so the words shiver and shake to evoke the proper comedic horror mood. Cinematographer Warrington recalled that Leni used a gong to startle actors. He mused, "He beat that thing worse than the Salvation Army beat a drum." While the film does contain elements of horror, according to film historian Dennis L. White, it is structured with an end other than horror in mind. Some scenes may achieve horror, and some characters dramatically experience horror, but for these films' conventional clues and a logical explanation, at least an explanation plausible in hindsight, are usually crucial and are of necessity their maker's first concern. In addition to directing, Leni was a painter and set designer. The sets were designed by Leni and fabricated by Charles D. Hall, who later designed the sets of Dracula and Frankenstein in 1931. The Cat and the Canary debuted in New York City's Colony Theater on September 9, 1927. Variety reviewed, "What distinguishes Universal's film version of the play is Paul Leni's intelligent handling of a weird theme, introducing some of his novel settings and ideas with which he became identified. The film runs a bit overlong, otherwise it's more than an average satisfying feature." A New York Times review expounded, "This is a film which ought to be exhibited before many other directors to show them how a story should be told. For in all that he does, Mr. Leni does not seem to strain at a point. He does it as naturally as a man twisting the ends of his mustache in thought." Modern critics have cited the film's impact and influence. Chris Dashiell states that everything is so exaggerated, so lacking in subtlety, that we soon stop caring what happens, despite a few mildly scary effects. Although he admits that the film had a great effect on the horror genre, and even Hitchcock cited it as an influence. Tony Raines has called the film the definitive haunted house movie. Leni wisely plays it mainly for laughs, but his prowling, Murnau-like camera work generates a frisson or two along the way. It is, in fact, hugely entertaining. While not the first film set in a supposed haunted house, The Cat and the Canary started the pattern for the old dark house genre. The term is, of course, derived from English director James Whale's The Old Dark House, which was released by Universal in 1932, which was heavily influenced by The Cat and the Canary, and refers to films in which murders are committed by masked killers in old mansions. Supernatural events in the film are all explained at the film's conclusion as the work of a criminal. Other films in this genre, influenced by Leni's, include The Last Warning, Leni's companion piece to The Cat and the Canary, released in 1928, the classic Vincent Price starring House on Haunted Hill from 1959, and the monster films of Abbott and Costello and Laurel and Hardy. While I can't be certain, I believe the scene in Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, where Freddy pushes down through the wall, reaching for a sleeping Nancy, is directly influenced by the scene in this film where the cat grabs the diamond necklace from Annabelle West's neck. The reported box office gross for the US and Canada is $325,550. The film proved successful enough for Universal to release a sound remake in 1930 entitled The Cat Creeps. A Spanish-language version of that film, La Voluntad del Muerto, was also released. Unfortunately, neither were as influential as hoped, and both are now lost films. Paramount Pictures released a remake in 1939, directed by Elliot Nugent and starring Bob Hope. It received positive reviews. Today, the influence of The Cat and the Canary mustn't be forgotten. Its blend of horror and comedy is as equally important as director's Leni German Expressionism style being brought to American cinema. Leni would go on to direct Charlie Chan and the Chinese Parrot for Universal, later in 1927. His final 2 films include perhaps his most famous, The Man Who Laughs, starring Conrad Veidt, and The Last Warning, both being released in 1928. Leni would pass away in Los Angeles on September 2, 1929, of sepsis brought on by an untreated tooth infection, only 8 months after the release of The Last Warning. He was 44 years old. Before we take a deep dive into The Man Who Laughs, I feel it's time to shine a spotlight upon a phenomenal German actor who brought to life a plethora of horrors to the silent screen. He's been continually mentioned throughout Season 1 of the Monster Archives. Join us next episode as we spend some time with Conrad Veidt, known in his native Germany as the Demon of the Silver Screen. This episode of the Monster Archives was written and produced by me, Ian Bates. For more on the Monster Archives, including scheduling updates and news, be sure to follow @Universal Studios Monsters on Instagram. And thank you for listening.